Representative Evans, if you'll come forward and speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The language that I worked on with Representative Stevens and also the Speaker's office came about originally in a discussion of the sports betting bill, House Bill 86, which this committee passed out. My concern was, why create more money that's going to go into the lottery when we're not spending all the money that is in the Lottery for Education Fund that we're able to spend right now? And a lot of y'all are looking at me like, what the hell are y'all talking about? What are you talking about? It's a little known fact to a lot of folks that we have been piling up excess reserves for the last 10 years in lottery that we are eligible to spend today if we wanted to appropriate those. We are by law required to hold 50% of whatever the prior year's deposits into the Lottery for Education Fund were in a reserve fund, in a lockbox, for lack of a better phrase. You put it in there, you hold it in case something happens and lottery revenues go down. You've got some money to use. It's responsible. It's what we should do. We should have some reserve money. For those that were here in 2011, you'll remember that prior to the changes in 2011, we only required a 10% reserve. So we increased that quite a bit in 2011. And at the same time that we increased it, we also passed changes that made it even less likely, if not nearly impossible, for us to ever need to draw on those reserves, because this body uncoupled the HOPE award amounts from tuition and instead tied it to lottery. So basically, if the lottery revenues go up, the HOPE award amount goes up. If the lottery revenues go down, then the HOPE award amount goes down instead of what it was prior to that, which was tied to tuition. And that was the big concern that this body had. So we went double safe. We made it less likely that we would need the reserves, and we increased the reserves. That's great policy, generally speaking. So 50% is what we're required to hold by law. We are holding right now 128% of what we are required to hold. So we are required in dollars right now to be holding $600 million. We are holding $1.3 billion, which means essentially today we have about $730 million that we could spend. So what I've proposed here, and I hope that you will consider, is trying to draw down on those reserves and spend them for what Georgians approved them to be spent on. This state did not approve a lottery just to have a lottery. They approved it for money to go to HOPE and pre-K. So this money should not just be sitting in an account when it's not needed for fiscal safety. So it would draw down about 10% over the next few years until it levels out. And then it would say, we keep the 50% requirement, but we don't ever hold more than 60. So that's still a really big buffer. And if anybody wants to make a comparison to what we do with our rainy day funds, this is still way more conservative, because currently, and I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, this is not normally what I do. I'm a lawyer, not a number person, but we currently have in our law that if our rainy day fund for the general budget ever gets more than 15% of the budget that year, we move that extra money over to the general fund. So we only have a 15% holdback on the rainy day fund. This is going to give us a 50 to 60% holdback. So still very safe. I don't know if y'all been watching the lottery, but even during this pandemic, people have been playing. So I think the idea that the lottery funds are going to go down is already pretty remote. It's going to be even more remote that we need them because of the way we've structured the HOPE awards. And this is still going to be a huge pot of money if we were to ever get into that situation. But that money could be used for HOPE and pre-K, which everybody on this committee knows could use some more funding so that more of our students could get access to the education that they need. So that's what it's there for. I would be happy to answer any questions if the committee has any specifically about the reserves. I'm going to leave the horses to my friend, Chairman Stevens.
Thank you, Representative Evans. So, and that's good information to know. Let me ask you this, and I know it's a little bit off subject, but with that big reserve that exists there now, could we technically restore the program to what it had been and use that funding to pay for the difference now, or is there still not enough money to go back to the way we had previously had HOPE structured?
Mr. Chairman, there's still not enough money to go back to the way that we had it structured, but there is enough money for us to go back to how it was structured for the technical college side, for the HOPE grant, because put that back to the way it was is only about 40 million. And as I told you, we've got 730 million that we could spend. And even under this conservative slide out of the money, for lack of a better way to put it, it would put about, I think I did the math, it's about 200 and something million that would come out the first year, then 130 million for the next few years until it levels out. So plenty of money. There's been 72 million that has gone into the extra pot every year for the last 10 years. Certainly at this point, it would be fair to call it recurring funds. But to further answer your question, it would put a dent in going back to the way that it was. And for those students who attend our regional colleges, it would get them pretty close, I think, to their tuition amount. For students at UGA or Georgia Tech, the more expensive schools,